As you know, we have thousands of thoughts every day. I like to think of these thoughts as stories, the stories I tell myself. And you've probably heard this many times. We tell ourselves stories, stories about who we are, stories about who other people are, stories about how the world works, stories, stories, stories. It's a really helpful frame for me and when I'm working with my clients to use this idea of stories. But what do we do when we can't stop believing the fictional story? We feel the fictional story as fact because it biographically happened. How do we let go of that fictional story, even though we know it is fictional? How do we believe the true stories about ourselves? If you're struggling to let go of what is fiction and hold on to what is fact, if you're struggling trying to let go of that story that you know is not true and hold on to the one that you do know is true, then stick around. I have three ideas that have helped me move through that struggle and help my clients move through that struggle as well. So the first thing is to name the narrator. Who is the narrator that you're hearing? Those thoughts that run through your head, name that narrator. Give it a name. When I was going through grad school, my first child was on the way, just about to be born. I was trying to run our business with my wife. I was trying to get my counseling hours done so I could graduate. And I had a couple classes left to take. And one of these classes was kicking my butt. It was everyone's butt in the class. It was really, really hard. It seemed like the professor only wanted us to fail. That we were on the tail end, and this professor was going to make it his mission to ensure we did not make it through. My perfectionism, I'm a recovering perfectionist, was kicking in because I wanted to get an A. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to do well in the class, and I just couldn't. There wasn't any thing I could do to shift it. Everything came back a C. And so this narrator was absolutely screaming in my head all semester, trying to push me to get an A, stressing me out. I was completely anxious, overwhelmed, overworked. But I wasn't paying attention to the narrator. I knew I was a perfectionist, but Pete the perfectionist, the name of my narrator, Pete just kept screaming at me. And I could hear it, I could see it, but nothing could shift for me. So naming the narrator, though, allowed me to at least notice when Pete was talking, when Pete was active. It allowed me then to figure out, okay, pay attention, wake up. Where do I feel Pete in my body? Just slowing down enough to say, oh, yeah, the tension in my chest. What are the words that Pete likes to use to get me to believe Pete? What are the triggers? What are the things that really get Pete fired up? Naming the narrator really, really helped me begin that process of creating space between what was happening, the story I was telling myself, the narrator, Pete, and choosing something different. The second thing is the author's authority. What authority have I given to the author behind the narrator? So, perfectionistic Pete could be the same name for the author. What is the authority I have given this author to write the story of my life? Well, I had given a lot of authority to this idea of perfectionism. I had believed that I could only be worth something. I could only be good if I attained perfection. And we all know that that's impossible. It's not possible to reach that perfection. But I didn't ever really question the author's authority. I didn't question this author that was writing my life. I eventually, with that class, had to really think through what was the authority I was giving to this author and why. And it really required me to go back and to understand the whole sort of developmental process that I had around perfectionism. Why? Why was I so driven by perfectionism? What in my life had caused that? What were the things that had shaped and formed that idea, that belief in me, that I chose to say perfectionism is the standard? Because I kept writing that story. You must be perfect. You must be perfect. A C is not okay. You're falling behind. This isn't ever going to work. but I would never question the author's authority. The author behind the narrator who was writing the script, I didn't question whether or not that person should be the one authoring my life. And the third point was just like, take the pen. I needed to just be empowered to take my own pen and write my own story, to really say what is the story I want to write and who's going to be writing that story. I eventually barely passed, barely getting that C minus to pass the class. I barely made it, but I chose in the end to get that C because I realized that when I looked at the full story, when I looked at what I was writing, what I was doing with my life, chasing perfectionism and trying to get an A in this class mattered nothing for my life. It wasn't going to change my life. It wasn't going to shift my life. And so I really questioned the ending of the story. Where was this story going to end? And for me, I was able to say, hey, I am going to be okay. If I get a C minus just to pass the class, because I needed to pass the class to graduate, I will be okay. It's not going to shift the rest of my life. I was able to rewrite the ending, knowing the ending I wanted. I was able to say, okay, I'm okay with that ending. So taking the pen and saying metaphorically, I'm going to write this story. I'm going to be okay and do my best with what I got. And if I get a C minus, I get a C minus because I got all these other things going on in my life. I'm going to be okay. And I just kept writing that story. And so as the perfectionistic Pete, the author continued to try to come up and say, no, 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 and write a story full of fear and fiction. I had to repeatedly choose to say and remember, I'm the author of this story. I'm taking the pen, and I'm okay with the way this story is going to end with a C minus in the class. And so those 3 points, hopefully they're helpful. Hopefully they make sense on some level. Hopefully you can start looking at your life and saying, okay, yes, this might start helping me loosen up on the stories I'm believing. This will help me find more freedom and empowerment to write the story I want to write. This is an ongoing process. It's the adventure of life. It's the fun part of life, of realizing like, I have the power to write new stories. And of course, this is always a process. I will always be working on this in different ways, inviting all the parts of me to the table. Perfectionistic Pete, the other authors in my life, they all get to be here because they were formed and shaped for a particular reason, out of particular experiences in my life. I'm not trying to pretend as if they don't exist. They're all invited to the writer's table to say, we're writing the life of Josh. We're writing your life, your story. We all get to be here. There's a reason they were all formed. Now, who's the head writer? Who's the person who ultimately decides what the script is going to say? And that's you. And so just think about that. Invite them all to the writer's table and all get to talk because all are part of who you are. All are part of the beauty of who you are. All are part of the uniqueness of who you are. The gifts, the talents you bring are all because of all those parts. So include them all. Don't exclude them. They all get to be there. They were there to protect you at some point in your life. They were there, and those stories were written as a way to support you. Now you get to decide. Are they supportive? Are they pushing you to the ending you want? Are they writing the story that you want? Are they pushing you more towards fiction and fear? Are they writing you to expand into the true person you are? So invite them all to the table, love them all, realize they're all part of you, but you are the head writer who ultimately gets to decide which story gets written.